Lists can be passed as arguments to methods, so in this lesson we're going to look at some examples of passing lists to methods. Let's start out by first creating a list. It will be numbers again. This time let's make it grades, and we'll put a few grades in. I'm going to make these even numbers to make it easy to look at things like average. Initialized into the grades list. I'm going to add a console read key. Now, the first method we're going to create will be a general method that could display the contents of any list. So we're going to call this method display list. Now, it will have to be of integers, but it could be any type of list. We're going to call this LYST, thinking of some good generic name for it. So all we have to do is loop through the list as we're used to doing already. So we're going to go from 0 to less than count, and we'll do a console write line, although we wouldn't have to do it that way. List sub I, like so. So let's call this method in our main program, and there's our list. The next thing we might want to do is create a method that will compute the average of the grades. So we'll call this one static double average, and again our list has the one parameter. Bring the screen down a little bit here. Okay, so find the sum very simply, and then return sum divided by list.count. And that's all we have to do. Back to our main program, and we'll do a console write, like so. Let's run the program, and that looks right. So to compute the average, we got the sum and then divided it by the number of elements in the list. Could have done that as a single statement, but I like the idea of showing you how to break it out a little bit. Although again, it's not necessary. We could have written the method like this. There we go. So we could have done it in one. Let's run it again, make sure that it's right. And it is. So either way works just fine. Now, for this last example, we'd like to take the grades and let's say we've decided to give each member of the class 5 extra points. So we want to bump up the grade of each student. So this is a void method. We'll call it curve grades. And again, our parameter is a list. And what we're going to do is we're going to say for int I equals 0, I less than list.count plus I. Let me scroll this down a little bit. List.I plus equal 5. Now, notice I wrote this as a void method, and notice that I'm passing the list by value. But actually I'm not, because lists are considered reference objects by default. And when I do that, I don't have to specifically pass it by reference because it is a reference object. Let's go back to the main program. We'll call the method with our list of grades, and then we'll display the list again. We may need a blank line right here. So let's put a blank line in. There we go. So let's run the program. So our first set of grades was 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Now it's 55, 65, 75, 85, 95, and 105. So as you can see, the method curve grades permanently modified the list that we passed to it, even though we didn't specifically or explicitly pass it by reference. But again, lists are reference objects by default, so you don't have to specify ref when you're passing them by reference. The compiler would just treat it as a reference object anyway. So there are 3 good examples of how lists can be passed as arguments to methods. So now we're ready to move to the next lesson, where we're going to discuss how to create random sets of data for our lists, especially numeric data, by learning how to generate random numbers.